things might look just a little bit different from the last time you've seen some of these areas. In the last couple of weeks, it's been quite an adventure, so today let's go over some of the things that have happened and the plans for the future. My plans were to build a push-up green, and so I needed to find some soil on the property that was similar to what I had going on down at the plot area. A lot of times when golf courses were first made, they just used the land that they had, and it was called a push-up green essentially because they would just push the soil into a spot for a green and shape it as it needed to be, and that was just basically how it was done on native soil. As time has gone by and people have learned more about this green process, many times now they are built more with drainage and then rock on top of that, and then 12 inches of sand, and it's definitely a process. If you want to see that process, actually you can go over to Ben Sims' Lawn Tips channel here on YouTube, and he did that whole process. So if you want to see that whole thing, definitely go check that out. But considering I have 40 acres of land here, I decided that it probably doesn't make a whole bunch of sense for me to try to do that process when I can go borrow some soil, and I have a sandier soil. So I decided to work with what I have, and I think that's probably what a lot of people would be doing, so I think it's a good process here. I did move a whole bunch of soil here just to shape this, but if you're doing this in your backyard, it's not something that you absolutely have to do. The reason that I did that here was because I wanted a certain shape, but also I had to get rid of all of this mulch material that was down here, which had sort of moved its way into the soil 3-4 inches, created just kind of a nasty layer there, so I had to dig that out, had to replace all that, and then shape it as is. But if you just want to go back in your backyard, take an area and start mowing it down and can maybe convert it to bent grass eventually, that's definitely possible. You don't have to do this whole process here, but also I wanted to make sure that this drains properly. I have a lot of slope down here, so I had to work with that, and my good friend helped me to make sure that everything runs out this far corner over here and will drain. This front side we created just a bit of a berm so that the front water goes down and goes down into a culvert. And so we have about 40 acres of land here, and my friend who's helping me with all the excavation and soil work that needed to be done, he's also a farmer, and farmers look at a lot of the different soils in their fields to figure out what the yield is going to be and to figure out what needs to be done with them. So you may or may not know this, but in a property like mine, I actually have about 4 or 5 different soil types. These are actually mapped out. Now they're probably going to be fairly similar here, but there are some differences, and this is all mapped out, and you can actually go look at that and look at where these types of things start and end and where the differences are. So I had a type of soil down at the bottom of that hill, and over the years all that sediment and things have washed down to there, so it's a specific kind of sandy, silty type of soil down there. So we came back here first because I wanted kind of a green side bunker. There's going to be a green back in this area eventually. I thought just more of like a natural grassy bunker over here would look nice. So we started digging some of this out, and we quickly realized that this soil was a bit heavier than what we were going for. So it's still nice and black soil, but it wasn't quite sandy enough to match some of the stuff that was down there, and just not sandy enough for what I was looking for. So we went back to those soil maps, and not too far away from there actually, there's a change in the soil up on this bit of a ridge here, and so we decided to take a core sample there. I took a couple of cores in different areas and look at those, and it looked much more similar to what I'm dealing with down at the bottom of that hill. Pulled off the grass that was here, and then just started to dig this out down probably 6 inches or so before we started to run into a little heavier stuff, but the top stuff was silty, sandy, just like I was going for. Brought our dump trailers down here, started loading that up, and load after load after load went down to the bottom section. I think we calculated probably about 125 yards of soil is what we ended up with moving down there. That took the better part of a couple days to get that done. Obviously it would have been nice to have a dump truck or something, but we made it work with what we had. You can see all this stuff here is definitely much more sandy, and once this gets wet, it actually breaks apart really easily. So these clumps like this, once they get wet, they actually just crumble really nicely. I think it's a good mixture for what I want to do. Once all of that soil was in place, that is where I leave it to the professionals. I'm not skilled enough with my skid steer to do all of this and get it exactly as it needs to be yet. I just don't have enough time in there. Personally, as I've seen some of these people work with these machines and the way that they can just feather things perfectly, and it takes a lot of time behind those controls to get that kind of feel for it. So left this to my good friend here who did all of this shaping in a matter of like 15 minutes basically. He sees it in his head, knows exactly how to run the machine and put the soil where it needs to go, and I was extremely impressed again at how you can just start with a blank slate and know what you want to do and then have that machine work for you. So after all that stuff was in place, it was time to get the irrigation done. So all around the green we got Rainbird Falcons. These are 6504 is the number on those, and I think I have a 12 gallon per minute nozzle in there right now. So these shoot about a little over 50 feet for me. I have them all on separate zones just because of my well, and I want as much pressure and as much water going to each one at a time as I can. Eventually, if I ever get more water, or I'm able to dig that well deeper or something, then maybe I could run more than one of these at a time, but right now that's the way it's going to go. And the nice thing is they put out some pretty good water, so I won't have to run them for an hour in order to get a lot of water out. Then along the outside here we just have the regular rotors like I have throughout the rest of the yard, and those go all around the perimeter so we get all this outer area watered. You know, everything should be pretty much covered with that, and I should have pretty good control over everything too, having these all individual as far as just being able to run one at a time. My plan for this eventually is bent grass, and I say eventually because I just don't know exactly when that is going to happen. I started this pretty early, I thought, but then as I'm going through it now, I'm realizing that because of moving all this soil in, it had a lot of different roots in it from grasses that have been back in my property for years and years and years that have roots that are extremely deep. So that stuff is still in here. There's a few tree roots in here. So I decided that right now I'm gonna put ryegrass on this whole thing, and I'm going to start mowing it, and then I'm going to see what comes up and what type of rough stuff I have in there, because I don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on the bent grass portion there in the middle and then have to basically kill it all off because there's so much stuff in there that it needs to be redone. A couple things that ryegrass does very well is, one, obviously you know that it grows in very, very quickly. That's going to help me to get something covered on here to try to keep some of that rough stuff at bay. If I just left this and let it go crazy, that would be probably a good process for completely cleaning it out, but it would take me months and months to get it clean and to spray it multiple times, and some of that stuff is likely to be Roundup resistant. If I'm looking at these fields over here and what I have in my property, there's a lot of Roundup resistant stuff, and so then I'd have to be spraying it with something where I probably have at least 28 days, if not more, of waiting to get some seed on there just because of the residual. Ryegrass is very good at getting in there, growing, getting thick, getting nice and turf-like very soon so that you don't have a whole bunch of other stuff invading. But the next thing about it is that I don't want to leave this lay as it is right now, just with this fine bare soil here, because any big storm we get and all of this grade and all this work that I did is going to be for nothing. And so it'll all end up washing down into that corner on the rest of my plots. So as soon as I can get some grass down on here, the better. Yesterday, I spent 6 hours out here hand raking, and a lot of people have said, Ryan, you know, you have all this fancy equipment now. I don't have any of this stuff, so how am I going to get this stuff done? I use that really just for time savings, but yesterday, all of this grade was in place, and I had to water it down just a bit so that I could work the soil again, but the best way to go about it was just a landscape rake and go after it. So I did 6 hours of hand raking. I am very, very pleased with how it looks. And you know, I'll be turning 40 next year, so I figured I better still test my skills and make sure I can still hack it out here. So the plan today is nothing fancy really. I'm going to seed the edges by hand. You could definitely do this with a drop spreader if you like to. I just prefer that process as I've gone along here over the years. I still have this part over here, and then I think I'm just gonna start mowing that down lower, trying to match it to the height as this stuff comes in, and we'll see how it all converts. That part has obviously been there for about 3-4 years, so I wouldn't have any problem cleaning that out and doing the bent over there, but I just want to do everything at one time. So we're gonna go with the ryegrass for now, and right in the middle, I'm not absolutely sure what I'm gonna do. I will probably just go slightly heavier in the middle part, and I don't want to go too heavy because then you're just gonna end up with a whole bunch of overcrowding. It would be better to get more towards a normal type of seeding and then let it come in and then overseed it heavier if it needs to be thicker as you go lower. So one other thing I will be seeding is I need to do something with this well berm right here. We're just gonna plant something on top of it, kind of let it look wild. And then over here on this side where this little berm is, see that sod? Took all of that part of the side of the green right there and moved it over here, and my wife did the puzzle pieces and put it all back together. It was actually not that long ago and it has started rooting down again. I decided I'm just gonna leave that there, and whether or not I mow it, I don't know. Could probably use the robot, but it needs to be rolled again in order to get a bit smoother. All these spots here on the edges of that, I'm going to be planting fine fescue and letting it grow taller. You may have seen that at quite a few golf courses, some of the rougher areas now, what they call native areas that you just don't mow very often. You don't do a whole lot to, and it gives it a nice wavy look in the wind. I want to have some of those areas. I'm going to have some more areas of that as we go along. That's the plan. So for seed, honestly, if you've never done this before, the best case scenario is to actually weigh it out. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you're wanting to put 7 pounds per 1,000 onto a certain area, then it's best to actually weigh it out. Set it really, really low until it's just flowing nicely out of there. Then just go over your area and see visually how it's looking once you get that 7 pounds onto 1,000 square feet. And if you have to walk it 3 times in multiple directions to get that evenly put down onto there, much better than starting this way too high and putting out a line that's just way too thick, because you can't really pick it up once it's put down. Everybody's walk speed also factors into it. So a lot of people ask, well, what setting do I use for a specific seed? But you know, bluegrass is a very small seed. This is slightly bigger. Tall fescue maybe just slightly bigger than ryegrass. And then your walk speed factors into it. There's a lot of variables, so again, the best case scenario if you've never done this is to just test it, then you'll get a visual of what it actually looks like. I've done this over the years enough times that I have a pretty good sense of what it should look like, but again, I can also do a light overseed in the future. It's very likely that not everything comes in 100% perfect on the first time, so don't feel bad if you have some areas that need some fixes later. That's totally normal. All right, from here I like a rake just like this to come through and just lightly scuff the surface, and that should put some of that seed just barely under the soil. Then we'll roll that over, it'll push that together and put the seed, so you have great seed to soil contact there, and that's exactly what you want. Obviously it's touching the ground right now, and if you get some cover over it, you're probably going to be totally fine, but I usually like to go the extra measure just to make sure that we're pushing this down into the soil just very lightly. Got my starter fertilizer on now. I'm using the same stuff as I typically do. Just make sure if you're using this that it has the one little tag at the top that says safe for seeding. This helps to prevent some of the weeds and stuff as they come up here. I don't find it to be absolutely bulletproof by any means. There's still definitely stuff that comes through and it doesn't get everything, but it's better than not having anything down at all, and I needed to put down a starter anyway. I'm actually low on most nutrients here in the soil. I think just that sandier part of it too doesn't hold on to a lot of stuff, so I do actually need that out here. So you can see behind me here too, I'm starting to roll out the straw blankets. I just get these locally. It's about an 8-foot roll by 110 feet or so. Just gonna roll all of these out and get this thing covered. That really helps to make sure that things stay in place. I don't get any washout, hopefully, if there's any storms, or it's minimal. And then also it really aids in the germination, helping to keep that moisture right against the ground. Does a fantastic job. And then I will remove these probably, it's going to be hard to say how long before I will remove them, but I will take them up as soon as I get to that point that the grass is growing well and I want to mow it, which isn't really too long on ryegrass usually. So don't leave these down and in place and try to mow over them with that twine and the stuff that's in there. It's not very fun to do. So roll those up after that. And I know it kind of seems like a waste, but I actually reuse these. I have a project up on that hill over there that I need some stuff, and I have a project going all the way up on the house right along the side that's going to need some blankets and stuff. So hopefully I'll be able to just transport those up there and reuse them. There's not going to be quite as much straw the second time around, but for those types of projects, it will work. All of the seed is down. I've been watering for a couple days now. It is Tuesday, and I started watering on Sunday, and I have just a couple of spots of germination. Nothing completely widespread yet, but I would say by tomorrow, hopefully I do, and hopefully by the weekend, I have a pretty good cover of grass starting to grow across here. Now, the reason that I started this so early, and not really at an optimal time as far as our weather goes, is just because I want to accelerate this process as quickly as I can into the fall, so when we do get into prime weather, I'm able to start actually doing some of the things that I need to do, and the grass is not just barely growing at that point. So I'm trying to get this growing enough, keep it surviving hopefully enough that we get into that ideal temperature in September, and I can actually make a lot more progress this fall. I planted 2 of those plots over there on August 3rd last year, and they actually turned out really well doing it that early. If you have the water, and if you can really watch it closely for fungus, specifically Pythium, it's going to be kind of an issue if you get things wet into the evening and you have those warm, humid temperatures. That's definitely going to be an issue. So I don't see this probably getting 100% through all of that weather that's coming up. We have a lot of 90s and a lot of warm temperatures at night, but I'll be able to overseed and fix in some more ideal weather. But hopefully by that point, I have this more mature than starting it, you know, so late and only having a few weeks before we even get to our frost, which is early October here. I'm going to be pleased here to have some grass growing, to look down onto this area and not just see a bunch of either mulch or bare dirt and weeds that need to be taken care of. It will be nice to see this thing green here in not too long of a time, hopefully. It's going to be a challenge to make it through some of the warmer weather coming up soon, but keep some water on it, keep things very dialed in as much as I possibly can, and keep playing golf. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.